3 to 5.
3 to 5. Okay.
It's flexible.
But now it's time for you to respond on what you heard also before. So this is a way researchers think about how to work with the different SDGs. And first out of the 5 is Maria Edström.
Yes, and I will not respond what the other says because I thought of saying something.
You have to say it in 3 minutes. So,
in 3 minutes, yes. Yeah. I will not also comment on that.
But we should also say that you're talking about the gender goal 5, and you are from the School of Journalism.
Department of Journalism, Media and Communication. And I was here this spring, so I will not repeat what I said at that time, because at that time I was asked to talk about the relationship between goal 14 and goal 5. So I will just say a little bit about that. And my perspective is that where there are people, you will have gender, and you will have gender challenges. And our society is facing many challenges right now. And I really think it's important that the academia work together and with other people outside. And I would also like to point out that I really appreciate the University of Gothenburg has taken this initiative to meet some of the challenges through this YouGot challenges, and some of you are probably part of one of those challenges, the centers. I'm part of one that's called AgeCap, that is Center for Age and Capability, that deals with the global challenge and the good news that we are getting older and healthier, but that will also demand certain things from our society. But my core engagement in the academia and also before academia has been gender equality and freedom of expression. And they are, I would like to say, cross-cutting matters that have an impact on all the goals that we have set up. And I think it's very important, and I said that in March, that you also note the portal text. You have 59 bullet points there where they kind of say that all earlier commitments are still valid among human rights and women's rights, CEDAW and everything. And it's easy to forget that because there's nowhere to be found some texts that I would have liked to have in the Sustainable Development Goals. And that there was a big struggle to include, for instance, freedom of expression, but it was not included. And you have to remember that you can look what goals do we have, but which are kind of forgotten within that matter. And the goal to achieve gender equality and empower all women and girls, that's what the headline is there. But then you have to think that it doesn't really mean women. It means that it's more better to think of gender, the social constructed definitions of women and men. And if you do that, then you look upon marine issues or water issues. I think goal 6 could of course been here as well, because they are very much interconnected. And when I was here in March, I kind of complained that the word gender was not mentioned in the Ocean Conference call for paper. And I also noted that our feminist government didn't say anything about that in their speeches. I wasn't in New York, but I kind of read the speeches and stuff. But I was very happy, like last week, I don't know if you've seen this report, The Rising Tide, A New Look on Water and Gender. I don't know. Came across that. Thank you, because I've even put it on the slide. It's the World Bank that actually talks about many of the things that I kind of pointed out in March. That they are water is very much interconnected with gender, and there's so much what she calls intended or unintended consequences for gender equality within this area. And she is, of course, mostly talking about water, but I think you can address it to marine issues as well. And she points out that water is not only an asset; it's also a space. Talking about more the esoteric values of water, that rivers may be considered to be holy, and there are other values than economic values to water. And I think that's very. She has some very, very good points. Like, for instance, that drowning, men are much more likely to drown, and even though they are more often know how to swim, and those are kind of things that I think where gender perspective can really address things on masculinity and stuff like that. It's also, now we have the Hurricane Irma, that in disaster areas, in developed countries, more men are likely to die, but in developing countries, more women. So there are all these kind of gender impacts in all things that are going on in society. But you also point out this thing with access to information that is so crucial for that. Often women and minorities are left out in the discussion and they don't have access to information. And then I would really like to just finish off by saying that freedom of information and freedom of expression are crucial in the system of if we want to move things forward. Because if we don't have access to the documents, and if someone, the press or someone else, is kind of scrutinizing the authorities, the business or academia, things will go much slower, I think. So, just
thank you. So this is what happens if you have a CN Society talk. You will get a report afterwards and work it back. Tyrone, you are next from Valand Academy, and yes, what should I say more?
Yeah, well, I'm from Valand Academy. I have photography.
Yeah.
And it's the Faculty of Fine Art and Performing Arts. So I was just thinking, when I was sitting here actually, I thought that maybe I should bring up what we. I was listening to the talks here, and I was looking at some of the environmental objectives, and I thought one was glorious mountain landscapes, I think it said, which of course would be applied to what I do, in a sense. But I think we work a lot with the sort of softer values that were mentioned here. And if I should say something about where we are based, it's in three kind of, it's storytelling, narratives or narration, and communication. And I had the opportunity to spend 4 days with the National Research Agency Formas in Gotland this summer. And the sort of main thing we discussed was actually communication. And it was communicating research, but it was also the work we're currently doing. I work a lot cross-disciplinary, and I think that sort of comes with photography. Photography was born out of an idea of sort of cross-disciplinarity, and it is a visual technology that many areas are using. I work with the goal 13, which is primarily my own climate action, and I would stress also the part of action there. And I think the idea of addressing students is really important, but also addressing the public, and particularly the younger generations. And I work a lot with a dear old friend of mine, colleague in Stockholm, called Per Holmlund, who is a professor of glaciology at Stockholm University. And we do work with glaciers, and we do work with areas in the Arctic, but with Svalbard and also northern Sweden, where we do comparisons of vanishing glaciers. We work with younger generations, the sort of future generations of coming researchers. They knew the new technologies that we need to know and use, and it's a very good way to bring them in and bring them on board. And just to briefly mention a project that is now forming here is the region, Västra Götalandsregionen, has initiated a collaboration that we will start working on, and it's about the coastal zone and the river valley, so the entire valley, so the river from Gothenburg up to Lake Valand. And it's about the stories, and it's about the cultural heritage and the future of that, the future challenges of the cultural heritage areas in terms of climate change perspective. And that is, again, a collaboration between many different areas, both within the university and outside of the university. So that's what we are trying to work with. And as I said again, the most interesting thing is communication and the sort of ways of telling stories about what is going on. We work there with sort of the ideas that we also have picked up from. An example of that is the collaborations between Johan Edström and Matthias Klum, for instance, but also the questions that have been asked by somebody like James Hansen, for instance, sort of asking for that dimension to be much more brought into the work on climate change. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll come back to what you talked about storytelling in a little while. Snuttan, are you the next one? From the Department of Biology and Environmental Science and representing one of the Yoga Challenge centers, SWEMARC.
Yes, thank you for inviting me to talk about SWEMARC, which is the Swedish Mariculture Research Center, one of the Yoga Challenge centers. And there are small halibut larvae in the picture there, and that's what we're working with, partly. We're one of the Yoga Challenge centers, and I think we target all these goals within the center. But we have tried to lift out the ones that we target more than the others. But when we take together everything that we do, it feels actually like we are targeting them all. But these 6 are the ones that we have sort of lifted out, that we are aiming for more. And the Yoga Challenges centers, they were challenged with the thing that they should bring up a challenge, a global challenge. And then out from that create a research area. And it should be transdisciplinary and interdisciplinary and bring together different subjects within the university. And our challenge, our global challenge, is about this globe that 2015 had a population of 7.3 billion and is expected to have much, much more in 2050. So how shall we make food for all these people? So that is our challenge, to find solutions for increased food production to meet the needs of a growing world population. And do that without affecting the ecology and the ecosystem and the globe then. So still reduce the ecological footprint, protect natural resources and ecosystems, and also advance rural development. So those things is what we have targeted in SWEMARC. And our solution then is increased sustainable food production in the oceans by or through aquaculture or marine plants and animals. And how can that be the solution then? How can we say that aquaculture is a good way to solve this global challenge? Well, one thing is that if we compare feed production, protein production from animals, if we compare fish and shellfish to chicken, pigs and cows, for example, the traditional land animals, the fish and shellfish are much more sustainable as it is, the production of those, because they have better food conversion. They make, out of 100 kilo feed, they make more body mass. And they are also, they make better yield out of a produced animal. We get more kilos of meat out of the fish than we get from the other ones. So that's one thing. Seafood are very healthy and nutritious food. We have everybody knows about the omega-3 long-chain fatty acids. We have very good proteins, good amino acid profiles. We have a lot of trace elements that are necessary for us, essential for us. Calcium, iodine, selenium, etc. And we can actually farm these animals when we can farm a lot of biomass that can go to food production and human food in quite sustainable ways with ecosystem approaches. Because one thing is the fish and shellfish that we feed with feed, that we add nutrients, they create a bit of waste, except creating biomass. But in combination with that, then we can add other organisms like blue mussels, oysters, seaweed that assimilate this, that extract the nutrients from the water, build into biomass, and we can harvest that and eat that as well. But we can do a lot of other things with it as well. And there we also have very potential for new and exciting food products, like the sea urchins. How many have tasted sea urchins? You like it? It says to be an acquired taste, but I also like it actually. Sea cucumber. How many has tasted sea cucumber? Yeah, a few too. That was I like that too, but it depends on how you prepare it. But anyway, now I'm getting out of my here. So we're also working with, and as you see here, we have the different goals. We also, because to gain attraction and to actually, it doesn't help if we learn how to produce these things in a good and sustainable way unless we have the public with us and the consumers with us. So we need to educate and increase the knowledge about how good these things are. But if we do that, then we have a good potential, a possibility to increase job opportunities and industry in rural areas. And we can have a positive integration with local communities and coastal activities. And here, of course, I found that another goal that also fits very well into the picture. I will just finish off by showing you some of the two good examples connected then to what this whole day is about. Because at the Ocean Conference in New York, we had an entrepreneur that we're working very much together with within SWEMARC on the research and development of sustainable aquaculture systems, Mögenlax, that was there on a side event invited by the Government Office of Sweden. And also, it was not only that day in New York, but it was also another event a little bit later in New York, the High-Level Political Forum, in which Sweden is part of the voluntary national review of the High-Level Political Forum on Sustainable Development. And Sweden has now produced this report, this voluntary report, and in that is an appendix, collection of examples, in which SWEMARC is number 15, example number 15, as one of the good examples of how Sweden works with the development goals. Thank you. Perfect.
So that was another example of how to work with SDGs, and now it's Kristen's Hansen's turn, and from the Department of History. Historical Studies. Yes, Historical Studies, and Professor in Environmental Humanities.
Yeah, well, actually, I'll tell them.
Okay.
Sorry.
That's good. Yeah, I'm going to change language a little bit because actually I come from the humanities. I'm the coordinator of a new area of study here at Gothenburg University, which is the environmental humanities. So, of course, what does that mean? It could mean anything. We don't really deal very much with lists, with numbers, with subcategories of other lists. We come from the perspective of the humanities. And actually today I was really thinking that I'm presenting a teaser, because this is what Marlon told me, of a longer talk to present an actual project that I'm doing. So that's what I'm going to do, just to dig into some of the things that you find in the humanities. And as I've been listening to these talks and the question of society comes up, I really wanted to yell out, we're just over here. There's a whole faculty, the Faculty of Humanities, which has been studying culture and society for centuries. And we're available to discuss with you these very complex issues. And that's what the environmental humanities is trying to do, to set up these bridges of language and communication between the sciences and culture, the other part of society, which is very important that we work together. So that's what I was doing this summer, was beginning the very early part of a new research project. So it's very, very fundamental. So I am working with these two goals because I have to. Yes. The Anthropocene is really teaching us that us people, we dominate land. And our domination is flowing both literally in the form of pollution and toxins and over-fertilized industrial agriculture into the oceans, where we are also increasingly dominating through the changing of the actual structure of the oceans. So this is the issue that this project addresses in a very philosophical perspective, and that's because philosophy is one of the humanities. So, yeah. So we spent a week in the Shana Research Station, and I chose that location to take a group of humanities scholars so that we're dealing very directly with the kind of science that scientists are producing, so that we're starting to develop language around the different processes. Here we're visiting Sea Farm, and one of the scholars here will be writing a short project on the history of and cultural uses of seaweed on the west coast of Sweden, because these things have very deep historical resonances, and I think if you can find avenues into culture that are already existing, including historical, then it's a really valuable way to begin opening up conversations about our ambitions for the future. So I just wanted to go through some of the questions that we might ask in a humanities context, and they're really different from what you might ask in a science context, but I think they really resonate together. And the first one of these is about ethics. And I would really imagine that we need to ask things like, who are we to alter life on Earth? And this is something that philosophers deal with very directly. Who are we to consume the planet? And at the more complex end of that question, we start to think about where do we begin and end as humans when we see ourselves in ecosystems. And it's here that philosophy and microbiology start to come together in a dialogue that's really, really interesting, very, very complex and very challenging, but extremely rewarding. The next question I think we really deal with very much is one of temporality, of time scales. How does our understanding of the past affect our understanding of the future in relationship to both land and water? So is there a failure? How did we get here? Is there a failure in our not understanding our past, that we are consuming the future? Because the Anthropocene is eating the future. So that's a colonizing of future generations. And I was really interested that Matt's had landed on that generational goal. So I think this is something that historians are addressing very much in the environmental humanities. Not just about history in the past, but history in the future. Because we inherit the past as we are as contemporary people. And we are also setting up the past that will be inherited in the future. And so historians think now as in future history as well as past history. So that's a really, really interesting question. And it really enlivens the debate if you think about what history are we creating. And then the third one is, so along with storytelling, as Tony already mentioned, and philosophizing, which is the obvious thing that we do, humanities scholars we like to ask very tricky, critical questions. And one of the scholars is a theory of science scholar who's very interested in model making, and because she has seen a lot of failed models. So she's asking very good questions of people around the science, not the scientists, but the community, the national parks workers, the fishers. How do you relate to these mega data models? So it's a really good question to ask, actually, if you want to find your science well located in communities. And then the last one is the artists, who perform some kind of magic trick in distilling enormous complexity and ambiguity into an image that can change the course of history if they get it right. The artists are the amphibious creatures, to come back to my two goals, between land and water. They can move between the real and the imagined worlds, between thinking and feeling, between knowing and not knowing. They really hold the key. Yeah. So that's just a really, really brief overview of this project that's just started. Yeah. And I just have to acknowledge that it's funded by the Senior Society Humanities cause, so thank you very much. And I really look forward to developing this conversation across this year. So, yeah, thanks.
That was a real teaser. You are really, we want to know more now.
Good, good.
But the last teaser is from Dupont, also from the Department of Biology and Environmental Science.
Thank you.
And you are
Also representing CeCAR.
CeCAR, yeah. So actually we had at least 3 of the Hugo Challenge centers represented. That's good. Perfect. And also focusing on 14 and 17.
Yes. I just chose those one because I was asked to link the two, but I think we also kind of link to more than 2 of the SDGs. So I'm a trooper. I'm a researcher. I'm spending time in the lab, and I'm going to just give you an example of how we relate to the big picture and how we think through CeCAR about how to basically answer big questions and rethink the way we do science. And like everybody else in the room, this is a big question. We are more and more on the planet. We are driving all these changes that's been mentioned by many people today. And all these, of course, are not without consequences. We have climate change, pollution, habitat destruction, and one of the subject we are investigating in Gothenburg is called ocean acidification, and that's specifically one of the SDGs, especially the 14.3. And it's a really interesting topic because it's directly related to our carbon dioxide emissions. So if you produce more carbon dioxide as we do, a big part of it is absorbed by the ocean, changing the chemistry. And there is overwhelming evidence today that this drives changes. There will be consequences. There will be change in ecosystem services. So if we keep polluting as we do, there will be consequences. And as I said, that's addressing directly one of the sub-goals, like minimizing and addressing the impacts of ocean acidification, including enhancement of scientific cooperation at all levels. So in a way, we know what we need to know to address this SDG. We know enough to say we have to cut carbon dioxide emission. That's another one, of the arguments. And so what we have to do is that we just have to cut carbon dioxide emission. But it's happening slowly, not fast enough, and that's why we were interested in going to the next level. And that's the goal of CeCAR. Is like acidification is one of our many themes, so we're interested in any kind of global problem. Could be corruption, could be antibiotic resistance, and acidification is one of them. But what we have within CeCAR is people from all disciplines. So we have social scientists, we have psychologists, artists, policy scientists. Everyone is there thinking about how we have to do science, how we have to communicate science to drive the change. And that's linking to the discussion we had about impacts. What we want to do is do research to ensure that whatever the impact we want to have, we produce the science we need to address specifically that, taking into account like everybody's culture, whatever stakeholder you talk to, we want to understand their culture. What will actually drive the change we need to have? And then that will feed back on science, what kind of science we need to do. And then the second step is how do you communicate that in the most efficient way? So that's the kind of question we have within CeCAR. So it's kind of helping the big picture, how we change the world as a whole. But then there's the other side of this kind of problem, and that's the local side. So for example, these guys, they are oyster farmers in Hong Kong. They don't care what's happening in Sweden, what's happening in the world. They just want to keep their tradition, they want to keep their job. And they are challenged by pollution, by acidification, by global warming, and so on. And to help these guys, to develop specific solutions for them, we need local data. And that's the second kind of part of this talk I will probably give on November is that we need solidarity. We need to work together. We need to bring, share knowledge, share money. And we have developed within this acidification program a big capacity building program. And so we gathered money from all the sources we could get. The IAEA is involved. We have the Ocean Foundation in the US. Many other sources. We gather large sums of money. And the idea is that we evaluate what's needed in Africa, in South America, and so on. And we go there and build labs, share knowledge, find salaries for people locally to gather the data we need to address the SDGs locally. So that's the kind of work that we also try to do. And related to close the loop a little bit, I was not in the New York conference, but during the conference we had the Ocean Day. And we tried to gather all this passion we had in all these countries, in Sweden, but also in Africa and so on, and tried to do something together. And we made like the Ocean Acidification Day, where people from all around Africa collected data at the same time. And it didn't matter the quality of the data. It was just to show we are willing to use this passion and work together to basically addressing these big questions. So please come on the 17th of November, I think it is, and learn more about this. Thank you.
Thank you. Do you want to come up, stand here, because I think we should have some final discussion. Also, it can seem like it's quite different types of presentations and ways of focusing on the SDGs, but I think that is the common thing now, that we have all these different ways of handling this. But so maybe first open up the floor. Do you have comments or no? My point was, do you want to comment on each other? Did you get ideas from each other?
Yes.
Yes.
At least I think I knew some people here, but some people I don't really know yet. And I don't think we were that different. We have maybe different ways of presenting it, but we all aim at the same goal. And I think that will help us to actually communicate better. So you all invited to join CeCAR, and we're going to have a meeting early, and it would actually be great to have you there to see how we can, work on communication, on social aspects, and all these are linked. So I think it was not that different. It's just a different style.
Okay. I don't know if you agree, but you say something, Sam, that we don't often hear at the university, that we do it, but we are heading towards the same goal. That you always hear about this, like the herd of cats that goes all different directions. So is this a new thing to actually have this agenda to? No?
I think you can look at the goals as a certain language that we can all speak, that you can refer to. Like if you talk about students, I've been for the last 2 years on every lecture I've shown the Sustainable Development Goals, regardless of subject. Because just for fun, for myself, can I include it in this lecture? And you always can. Depends on if you do it on semiotics or if you do it on the topic of the goal and stuff like that. And every time I ask a student, have you heard about these goals? And every time they say no. It's really depressing. But I mean, now,
Hey, now they're
student by student. But I think you shouldn't forget that those really basic things that we need to kind of communicate, that this discussion is going on within the academia, within the society, everywhere. And they need to know that, because they are interested, but they don't have the language. I mean, even though they're interested in these issues, they don't know about the goals. So I think it's really good that there's a student day on the 3rd of October, that the students also have this engagement that now I also tell my students you should go to that student day. So they also get the community around these issues.
So all of us spread the word to the students to attend 3rd of October.
Yeah.
And I mean, what you say, no matter what subject, you can find goals that could go with it.
Yes.
And it's a little bit what I started out with. The SWEMARC covers all these goals, because if you look into them, then you can always find something in the subtext describing that goal that actually fits. But what I think also is really fun, we have heard you said we should hear more about it, storytelling. And that's something you have been talking about. And when we went to Almedalen with SWEMARC this summer, we also had storytelling in our exhibition there, and I think storytelling is something that we can use more even the concrete things that I presented on how to farm a fish. To have the storytelling behind and the history behind the story of the people in the coastal areas towards all the what do they have for connection to food from the sea, to fishing, to everything connected to the sea, and how that can then be used in our different research ways. So I think that is something I would like to collaborate more on and develop more also within SWEMARC. Would you like to comment on that?
No, man, I think that it's really interesting, and I have always worked in a cross-disciplinary setting, and I think one of the sort of maybe easiest way of actually getting to know each other is through the stories we tell. We all tell stories. That's how we communicate with each other, and we have done that since we were, I don't know, walking around caves. So I think that is very good. And I think the goals as well is something that kind of set up almost like a chart of you can take your pick, but we can all relate to it somehow, and we can choose the way we relate to it. And by doing that, we can also choose sort of what story do I want to bring to the table. So I think that also is, and I agree with you. I also always start my lectures nowadays with, okay, so this is my goal, this is what I'm working with. But I think they can be used in that way as well.
Would you say that is the common view in your department, in your research community? Or?
That they haven't heard about it, or?
No, that they are this broad and reaching out, or is this a new thing
You mean in terms of what we do at the faculty?
Yeah.
No, well, I think it depends on
I meant also for us that are here, is it just you, or is there other things going on that we also could link up to?
Oh yeah, I think so. I mean, it's something that of course we do from various. We're very different within the faculty with whether you work in film or dance or music. But yes, I think there are continuous sort of different types of projects and individuals, and I think we need to somehow find a way to actually engage individuals and bring them in to actually work. And maybe we are ahead of that with our faculty, but it could be better, and it could be better.
Yeah. So I think this idea of taking a group of humanities scholars into a science context is one of the sort of ways I was trying to build a community that's available for those kinds of conversations, because I think we need to educate each other. I think that humanities scholars really need to be able to talk to scientists, because what I observed was that conversations were fascinating, and the points of connection were so much more than what I thought. So, can I just give one quick example?
I have you do.
Yeah.
Because I have also a question.
Yeah, because so one of the artists had a jar of sand that she collected from Sicily on their holidays, and it was from a very beautiful pristine beach where they'd been swimming. And to teach her students close observation, she tipped it out onto the desk and asked them to separate it into man-made and not man-made. And what they discovered was this sand was incredibly polluted with microplastics. And it absolutely changed the students' experience of their own role in designing the future. These are design students from Horticourt. They are designing the next generation of plastic disposable furniture, of cups and drink bottles that we find on the beach. We have to talk across disciplines if we want to solve this problem, and we have to start with the younger generation to educate them in the ethics of what they're working with, and to always bring that thinking into their realm. So the textile designer and engineer who's working with microfibers and how the fabrics, the textiles that she's designing break down in washing machines is really materially linked to the ocean chemists who are working at Kristina, but they've never met. So we have to design these pools of expertise to talk to each other and educate themselves in the other's field. And then we're really productive, and then we're really working in a strong way. So it's important that we don't forget the humanities and that we don't forget the sciences and that we start to have more and more of these conversations.
Not that much. No, I think actually the global challenge is doing this. I can feel that, I can see it in SWEMARC, definitely. We are brought together with the designers, for example, or we have brought together all this, and law and economics and everything, and we sit around the same table and we discuss these things and we show each other, and from this it develops new lines of research or collaboration. And I just have one fun example I have to take as well, that because we're sitting there on a conference at Tyrone, actually, on the sea and so on, and we're sitting there, and I was involved working with horses, so we got the question if we wanted to join a competition of creating a sustainable jumping fence for the international show jumping here in Gothenburg. So we were 3 girls, of course, that's always when it comes to horses, within biology or within science that said, okay, yeah, let's go for it. But then we still, we need to have a designer. And so I went to SWEMARC and so asked Carl-Johan Skog at there, if you want to come, yeah, I don't know much about horses, but this sounds fun. I'm working with sustainable material, textile and so on. So then we brought together that, and we won the competition. We have had a fence on the Gothenburg Horse Show, and now 2 weeks ago we was asked to make another fence for the European Championship here in Gothenburg. And now we are creating a whole new area of science that actually combining science and design and sustainability. Not really what you expect. So it's, yeah, can go anyway.
I think what is bringing us all together is this will to work across discipline and together and communicate and understand each other's culture. And I think that's really a really important part. But the second part, and something that is really important for me, is impact. And that's what we discussed many times. I want to go back to it, that we want to be sure that what we do is really going to reach the impact we want. And that's not that, at first it's difficult to evaluate, as was said, but then it's also very difficult to do, to achieve this. And for example, we want people to change. We want people to change their behavior. That's something that is needed globally in all societies. But we think naively sometimes as scientists that producing information and communicate it in a meaningful way will drive the change. It doesn't work. Exactly. So what you have to do is also understand what kind of information, what kind of methods, communicating with emotion, with values and stuff like that. And that needs rethinking science too. And that's what we try to do in CeCAR too, is like really focusing on one specific impact and testing it for real, not just doing, okay, I'm going to do this, that's for sure going to, and it can have an impact, being a social media success, people will hear about it, being interesting, will learn, being shocked, whatever, but that doesn't mean they will change. And that's what we try to do, we try to see what is actually driving the change. And that's, I think it's exciting today, and in general, because we all kind of naive, but want to work with other people, and we should, that's research, that's science. It's not just doing it, it's just doing real research. And that's why I hope we will connect more and more and do that and really evaluate impacts. So that's why I'm excited about these days.
Do you have a special method for doing that?
Yeah, I think we can do it. I can give you an example.
Oh, yeah. But
yeah, we do.
I also think what we linked with Anna and also Helene, what they talked about,
sure.
They have some kind of method, and maybe that is a topic that we could bring up later during the fall. Yeah, it's really interesting.
I can talk about it during my talk too, because what we do is really that. We try, for example, different types of information, different types of communication, and follow people for a long period of time and see did they change or not. And we ask them simple things. Can you cut meat consumption by half for the next 6 months? And we inform them about different things that would potentially drive their interest or their change, and then we see if they do it or not. So in 3 months from now, we'll actually interview these guys and say, okay, what did you do and why not? We'll see. So that's the kind of science we do.
And maybe the result comes in November then.
Maybe, yeah.
Okay, open up. Lasse?
Well, back again to what I was talking about earlier, because when we are researchers, we are, as I said, naturally curiosity within us. I mean, we want to explore more things, and we see that there is some sort of, say, a multidisciplinary research that is the thing today, and when you start with it, you see that it develops and develops and develops, and you get more and more knowledge. And I mean, what I know, suddenly someone else will know in a different discipline and so on. But the thing is that we are a small community, all of us researchers. The big community is the students, once again, really. And the problematic thing is to get all this transdisciplinary or multidisciplinary research into our courses to make our students aware of this multidisciplinary, all the things we are doing within the YouGov challenges here should be in one way or the other made into some sort of the student awareness of as well. We are doing a very small thing now in a couple of days, that we are bringing one of our courses with 25 students up to Chandler, where we do a law exercise, but in the natural sciences environment, where my students now start to see something else. Okay, there are people doing other things here in the world, you know. And that's an important thing, because now you suddenly get new inputs on to say what the law really could be for natural sciences. So I mean, there is the task, there is the difficult task. Sorry for being so negative.
Yes, but I think it's growing, those ideas. I mean, we are now, SWEMARC is involved in the education of our Czechs, for example, that have a course now, a project course that will run for 1 year, that they will develop things in the Aarhus community, which we will go then and present SWEMARC IDs, so to hope that some of the students take on an aquaculture situation and then start work with that for that year. Hopefully several groups will think it's interesting. But yeah, so you will get very soon an invitation to a transdisciplinary PhD course that will take place in October at Shannon and Kristina, which will be focusing on transdisciplinary methodology for developing a new industry, like an aquaculture industry, for example, and so on. So it's growing a little bit, at least in different places.
But we have not measured it, so we...
No!
Jessica?
Yeah, time. Well, my question is concerning, I think you all mentioned sort of the international dimension of developing countries specifically. And I'm thinking, how do we make sure we don't have, because we're quite a homogenous audience and people in this room today, and so how do we make sure that we don't impose our perspective in less developed countries where they have less resources themselves to carry out this kind of research? How can we make sure that we don't do that? Or is it important not to do it? Maybe it's not. Maybe it's bad.
I can explain what we do. So the approach we have is that so the IE has this program which is on international cooperation. So first thing we did was evaluate what was there. So we sent a questionnaire to all the main marine places in Africa, and then what do you have, what don't you have, what kind of questions are you interested in. Then we group them in different categories and we organize trainings. So just to share knowledge, this is the state of the art for equipment. Well, if you want to do this kind of research, this, and this. And
that's still you saying.
Sure, but that's kind of offering knowledge, and that's it. Right. And then the second step is a self-organizing network. So they decide what they want to do. Right. We just provide the equipment, the knowledge, and support. So there's a mentoring program. So they're linked with one researcher in the field somewhere else. And then my role is done in a way. When I go there and teach, I'm out, and if they have questions, we will be there. But after that, they have to decide what is important. But the first step is really to allow them to do the research they can do. So we see where they are, what they can do, provide the additional equipment and information. And then it's not exactly what you say. I don't want to impose what they should do about it. They know better what is important for them, what is a key question, what kind of resources, what kind of fisheries, and we are just there for advice or support, and that's it. But I'm not going there ever and tell them this is what you should do. And that would be wrong, and I don't think people would like that anyway, right? So I think that's the best approach, is going there, offer opportunities, and sometimes it's not going to work, I know that. But at least you offer opportunities, and then after that, people should be self-organized. So they have networks, regional and global networks where...
So I'm a natural scientist myself, but I'm imagining that humanities that you're representing and you that could maybe help also, because I'm just imagining that it will be a different mindset.
Well, I can maybe say just something very briefly on that. The colonial world and the results of colonial occupation is one of the major subjects that the humanities is concerned with in contemporary politics. So this is a huge discussion in the humanities.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't do anything without understanding the historical context in which we're working and all the consequences of that. It's a huge field of study. So I find some of the scientists incredibly cavalier in this. The politics that they enter into unwittingly and without
So I can just put on my HCAP hat and say that what we're doing, we have been discussing that because also HCAP started off from very local, like the work here connected to the hospitals and stuff like that. So you're very locally situated, but that we have a international advisory board where people come from different regions, like one from Latin America. It sounds crazy, but I mean, it can't be too many also. But with the aim to also build up that similar institutions in other regions. So you could have like a HCAP Latin America or an HCAP Africa. And we also have started thinking about how, like, if you want to apply for seed money or something, that going abroad it should always involve a partner in a low or middle income country. So you can put like you can build a design on how you work to get another involvement. I think, but because I think we also have to be aware of that in terms of, say, research on dementia. There is a lot more knowledge here than in Kenya. So it's like also it is a matter of also transferring knowledge that we should be aware of, that we have the resources and they don't, and it's like, and how do you kind of go from there? But we're still kind of in the making, but we have these discussions within HCAP just around those topics.
And that could also refer to the environment for development. Is that called on the Department of Economics that have similar centers around the world. So, someone said that we are a limited number of people here. Yes, we are. But thinking of the broadness of competence and the network that each of us have, we actually have quite a possibility. And I think what you have done also is to engage us. At least myself, I get. I said that this is like a pit stop, but so we get some new energy moving on for this fall, and I think the seriousness also in the issues. I think that is really necessary. We need to focus and we need to deliver. Actually, it's not just a discussion club. It is aiming for getting real things done. So, also looking at Florina, the last topic we talked about internationalization, and we're doing now a short review of the links that we have to different universities, but also to different international scientific, but also policy organizations. And we will have some kind of deliverable from that, but that is not one it's a living document. So, but we at least want to know who are we collaborating with at this point, and where do we want to go further. I think Southern Africa and Africa is of course one area, but there will also be others. So, what? Asia. Pit stop is also food and drinks. So I think we will end now, thanking all participants here.
Lena?
some sustainable food.
Lena,
Try to
did you want to
eat
present
more algae.
people like as you did normally? Did you want to present people as you normally did? Like, because you said it's that we were watching this group, I think we're not.